bonus.
Well, good to be with you.
I'm doing great. It's good to see you again, too.
Yeah, not a good day to sell global warming. Cold.
And they're still doing it.
They're trying.
Let me see if I get this straight. We're going through, what is it, polar vortex? Is that the tagline that they've attached to this?
I call it cold as hell.
Yeah, you and me. But we call it winter, typically. Right. The reason for the exceedingly cold temperatures is that the Earth is heating up. Is that about it?
I think so.
Okay. Good. Now that we cleared that up.
Solved that problem.
Great to have you here, and I know that
you.
we're going to get right to the phones in a minute.
Yes, sir.
We were talking during a newscast, and I was asking about Benghazi, and that's my first question to you. There are so many unanswered questions about Benghazi.
Right.
We still don't know why cross-border authority was not given. We still don't know who gave the stand-down order, because apparently that did happen, either to General Ham or the Admiral in the Met, or whoever received that. The end result being there was no military response to help our people. My question right off the bat is, how come at this juncture, this far down the road, we still haven't seen a special prosecutor on this?
You know, that's a really good question. But here's what we do know. We do know there was no protest. We now know that every survivor who was interviewed by the FBI on the 15th, the 16th, and 17th of September, the people who lived through the attack, all of them indicated it was a terrorist attack, not a protest. I finally talked to my first survivor about a month or so ago. Nice young man. He said he was watching his video screen. He was the security officer for Benghazi, and he saw 16 to 20 heavily armed men rush through the gate, carrying a banner in Arabic. At the time, he didn't know what the banner said, but it turned out to be the banner of Ansar al-Sharia, the al-Qaeda affiliate in Benghazi. So we know from the FBI and from survivors that there was never a protest. Chris Stevens would have never went to bed around 9 o'clock if there had been protesters outside the consulate. So how did the protest story come about? We know that somebody in the White House on the 14th of September
fabricated it.
Well, they took the intelligence community's report of a al-Qaeda-inspired terrorist attack, and somehow by the time the White House got through with it on the 14th of September, along comes Susan Rice. Now, Susan Rice tells us, as they're interviewing the survivors, that there was no terrorist attack, no al-Qaeda involvement. This was a protest caused by video. And she's telling us this, and the world, as they interview the survivors. Why would she do such a thing? It's 7 weeks before an election. So why would Susan Rice, one, be on TV and not Secretary Clinton? She was the UN ambassador. She didn't have any jurisdiction over Benghazi. Why wasn't Hillary Clinton on television on the 15th of September? Here's what Susan Rice said. She was too distraught to appear on television.
Oh, that's a shame.
If that's true, then should she be president of the United States? Remember the 3 a.m. phone call, the commercial about Barack Obama?
Right.
So if it's true that she could not gather herself to talk about what happened on her watch, then one has to wonder, is that really qualifications to be president? I don't think that's true.
So with so many unanswered questions, then why don't we have a special prosecutor?
Susan Rice, I think, went on television because she was the most politically friendly person to the president. So I want to know what happened on the 14th of September in the White House, the Council of Deputies meeting, who came up with the protest story, who fed it to Susan Rice, and I want to know why the president himself, for 2 weeks after the attack, clearly, when it was clear to all concerned, it was never a protest caused by video, kept telling that story.
Well, not only that, but he and the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, made videos that played in other parts of the world that blamed the video.
Well, remember when the bodies were being recovered in Andrews Air Force Base, Hillary turns to the couple of the family members saying, we're going to get the guy who made that video. Her own people in real time, Greg Hicks, who was the number 2 guy in Tripoli, he testified.
Right.
Chris Stevens says, got to go, we're under attack. Not one communication came from Libya to Washington, out of Libya to Washington, to suggest it was a protest. And the third person in the State Department emails the president of Libya identifying the al-Qaeda group responsible, so the day after the attack. So how could Hillary Clinton 2 days later blame this on a video? And how could the president for 2 weeks later blame it on a video? You got to remember, you're 7 weeks before an election. And Hillary Clinton testified publicly that she didn't know about the numerous security requests coming from Libya to enhance security. Read the Wall Street Journal editorial by Greg Hicks today, who is the number 2 in Libya. They're trying to blame Chris Stevens. Chris Stevens is not to blame here. How could she not know about the security request when the Secretary of Defense knew about the threat conditions and the security request? On June 10th, Bob, the consulate was attacked. They blew a hole in the wall that 40 people could go through.
And before that, the British Embassy was attacked.
Before that, in April, the British Embassy was attacked, and they closed. The British closed their consulate, and the Red Cross left town because it was too dangerous. We were the only ones left. So are you telling me that she appointed an investigative team to look at the attack in June 10th, and from June 10th to September 11th, she never asked another question about what's going on in Benghazi? That makes no sense to me.
Well, and that brings me back to my original question. With all of these unanswered questions, with all of these mysteries, with plots within plots and storylines within storylines, why don't we have a special prosecutor?
Well, you got to get the Congress to act to appoint one, and I don't see that. Do you think Eric Holder's going to appoint one?
No, I doubt it seriously.
I don't think so either. Now, this intelligence community report was helpful. It said it was preventable, and there was an intelligence failure, and it was a terrorist attack, not a protest. But they don't tell us anything about how the White House manipulated the evidence to come up with a protest story. They don't explain how the president kept saying it was a protest when the Secretary of Defense testified, and General Ham testified, the AFRICOM commander, that he told the Secretary of Defense in real time there's a terrorist attack in Benghazi. Panetta and Dempsey went to the White House and told the president there's a terrorist attack, not a protest. Now, if the Secretary of Defense tells the president on September the 11th there's an attack on our consulate in Benghazi
while it was ongoing,
where the heck did this protest story come from? I know this. That was the best story they could tell for their political survival. The narrative was bin Laden's dead, Al-Qaeda's dismantled, terrorism's on the run, Al-Qaeda's on the run, we're out of Iraq.
And the last thing he wants right before an election is another Black Hawk Down.
It was a pre-planned terrorist attack, a long time in the making, you could see coming for months. It destroyed the narrative about the real rise of Al-Qaeda. Libya was the first case, the first situation where you could see Al-Qaeda coming back. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama missed it, and I think that's going to be news for a long time to come.
Well, and what's really disturbing now is, as you mentioned earlier, the narrative that they want to spin these days is blaming it on the ambassador who's dead and is unable to defend himself.
Please read the Greg Hicks, the #2 guy, editorial in Wall Street Journal, the #2 man in Libya, talking about how Greg Hicks did not deny himself security or the people on the ground in Libya security. It came from Washington. They're really, honest to God, trying to blame the dead guy. I'll have no part of it. There's no place I can't go in the country where somebody doesn't come up and say, stay on Benghazi. I've been on this from day one. Been in the military. When you put people in harm's way, there's a understanding between them and our country that we're going to look after them and do all we can. Sometimes it doesn't turn out well, but the idea they would be abandoned and you would lie about what happened to them has made a lot of Americans upset. So Benghazi continues to be a story. And
you understand the frustration of people who feel the same way that you do and want to see more done about it.
I met with several family members. They've come to my office. We're not going to give up because, one, has anybody been fired?
No.
I was just watching Fox News, and you see Chris Christie behind you there. Well, they closed 4 lanes of traffic. That's a bad thing. They have every right to look into what the governor knew and when he knew it. But he did act. He did fire people responsible for causing the traffic jam. Political retribution is not acceptable in America, and he took decisive action. Name one person who's lost their job or been fired because of Benghazi.
Well, nobody. And Lois Lerner in the IRS scandal was able to take retirement and collect her full pension. 17 after 4. Let me quickly get to the phones here because I know a lot of people have questions for Senator Graham, beginning with Juliet, who is in Dacresville. Hi, Juliet, and welcome to the program. You're on the Bobby Mack Show with Senator Graham.
Thank you, Bobby. Senator Graham, I have two related questions for you. I once asked you directly the question where you got your authority to vote for Obamacare because, and your answer was simply, we're a Big Tent party.
No,
that wasn't an answer to me.
No, I didn't say that. I've never voted for Obamacare.
You did say that, but the next question is, why is Congress voting as though we're a democracy with majority vote instead of whether a program is constitutional?
Good question.
Okay, thanks, Juliet.
Very good question. To Juliet, I don't know Juliet, but she says I met her. I've never voted for Obamacare.
No Republican voted for
No,
Obama.
here's one thing every Republican has in common who was in the Senate at the time. All of us voted against it, and every Democrat voted for it. And I don't appreciate...
Well, same in the House.
Yeah, you can attack me for whatever reason. I understand that. This is a democracy. People get to vote. But, at the end of the day, don't tell me I did something I didn't do. I've never supported Obamacare. I'll be glad to show you the tapes of the debate in 2009 when I went on the floor of the Senate and said, this is Chicago-style politics. They're buying the 60th vote, the Cornhusker kickback,
right,
Louisiana purchase.
Right.
I'll be glad to show you the tapes of how hard I fought it, and I'm still fighting it. But one thing I want to do is be smart about it. Shutting the government down to defund Obamacare, I thought was a tactical mistake. I don't believe the president will defund his signature issue. And every day we shut the government down, it was about us. And every day we've been looking at Obamacare without the government being shut down has been a good day to explain to the American people exactly how bad this law is. This is strangling our economy. As to me and how I vote in my job, I try to represent my state honestly. I try to do what I think is best for the state and the country. And at the end of the day, I'm very proud of my fiscal record, my socially conservative record, and my strong support of the men and women in uniform. Look at my record. Ronald Reagan said there were three-stool strategy, three-leg strategy, basically. Fiscal conservatism, social conservatism, and national security above all else. When you look at how I've represented this state, I'm proud of my conservative record, but I will make up my own mind. As to judges, that other caller,
right.
Let me just say this. I don't know of how to create a system where Republicans get all of their judges approved and Democrats never do. I've always believed that the role of the Senate constitutionally is to vote for nominees that are qualified, not to avoid the election and take my view of who should be appointed, but whether or not the person is constitutionally qualified, of good moral character. Senator Thurmond voted for Justice Ginsburg not because he agreed with her, but because he thought he was qualified. She was qualified. Alito and Roberts got 22 Democratic votes, and Alito got 5. We broke the Democratic filibuster. If you want conservative judges, Bob, you better elect a conservative president, because don't be under the illusion that if a Democrat wins, they'll never get to appoint anybody to the Supreme Court. Because when our day comes in 2016, when we get the White House back, and I think we will, and we want to appoint a conservative judge, I can go to any Democrat in the U.S. Senate and say, I'm asking you to vote for this good qualified person because I'm asking no more of you than I ask of myself.
Well, but unfortunately, it seems as if all the compromising from the left is expected to be done by us and never done by them.
Well, I can say this. John Roberts got 22 Democratic votes, and Alito got 5. At the end of the day, President Bush, after we broke the filibuster, got 90% of his judges appointed. But this started with Ted Kennedy declaring war on Judge Bork. Do you realize that about 70% of Supreme Court justices were appointed and confirmed without a hearing? This declaring war on the judiciary is sort of a modern thing that started with Ted Kennedy. And here's what I think. Elections do matter. If you want to make sure conservative judges are appointed after 2016, we better win the White House, because that's the best way to ensure that result.
So you got a big event tonight, what, in Greer with the Chamber? Is that right?
The Chamber of Commerce is having an event over in Greer, the Greer Chamber, and me and Tim Scott are going to be talking to the folks about how to create jobs.
You mean that ventriloquist dummy?
Can you imagine? Tim Scott is one of the nicest guys I've ever met.
He's a great guy.
He's a great guy, going to be a terrific senator for as long as he wants to be. We get along very well. But can you imagine what would happen if a Republican had said this about some liberal Democrat, questioning their sincerity?
Well,
and
Jesse
their
Jackson or Reverend Al.
What
if you said that Jesse Jackson was a ventriloquist dummy?
They would have been, would have been all over us, and they should have been. Tim goes through a lot, but he handles it really well.
Yeah, he does.
That guy is tough. He's got good character, and it speaks more about the man who said it than it does about Tim Scott.
Yeah, I would agree. Back to the phones, let's bring in Becky. Are you in Little River, Becky? Is that right?
Yes, I am.
Great,
Little River.
Great to have you here.
Yes, thank you.
You're on with Senator Graham.
Hey, Becky.
Hey, Lindsey, I'd like to know why you considered the Internet Regulations Bill to take away our rights to allowing us a free Internet without government interference.
I don't know if I'm really familiar with a bill that does that. There's two things that I do know about the internet. That one is about internet sales. I grew up in Central, and we had a restaurant and liquor store and a pool room. So if you're selling a product in South Carolina in a brick and mortar business, you have to pay sales tax. So I believe if you're selling a product over the internet in South Carolina, you should pay sales tax, because it's not fair to the brick and mortar businesses. I'm for buying anything you want to buy on the internet, as long as it's legal. I just think the tax treatment should be the same. Amazon, who is a big internet supplier, agrees with that. The other thing that came up with the internet was, the internet is a great device, but there's a dark side to the internet.
Yeah, especially if you got Google Chrome.
Yeah, there's a dark side to the internet, and I want to make sure we're protecting our kids from pornography, and that we're.
Well, Senator Graham, I don't mean to interrupt, but don't you think that's the parent's job and not the government?
No, I think it's the government's job to make sure that pornography is not sold in a store. I think if pornography is illegal in a store, it ought to be legal in the internet. I think it's the government job to regulate young people not being able to buy tobacco products, and if you can't buy it at a store downtown because you're underage, you shouldn't be able to buy it on the internet.
Well, I just, there's so much government regulation going on, you're getting to where you can't breathe in this country any longer.
Well, the one thing I do want everybody to understand, that there is a burden put on businesses unbearable. You're absolutely right. But as far as individual freedom, with every freedom comes a responsibility. So I'm in the camp that I want to keep child pornography off the streets and off the internet, because if it's illegal downtown, it ought to be legal on the internet. But generally speaking, go on the internet, say and do anything generally you want to do is fine with me. You got freedom. You got freedom of speech, freedom of expression, but you don't have freedom to sell pornography. You don't have freedom to sell cigarettes and drugs to kids or anybody else. And I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying the internet has to fall under the law like everything else, no greater, no worse. And when it comes to taxation of the internet, I couldn't agree with you more. That's the last thing we ought to do.
Becky, thank you for the call from Little River. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah. And Becky touched on something that I think is a responsive chord with a lot of people. Gallup poll today, 2/3 of people say the federal government is too big and too powerful. We're going to talk about that a little bit more and get more of your calls in here for Senator Graham right after the news. 4:30 now here on the Bobby Mack Show, live and local on WORD 106.3. Back to the phones we go. Let's bring in Jim, who is in Anderson. Hi, Jim. You're on the Bobby Mack Show with Senator Lindsey Graham.
Hi, Bobby. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call.
Sure. Just have a couple of quick observations and then a request, and I'll listen to Senator Graham off the air.
That'd be fine.
Right.
I couldn't agree with him more that what we need is a truly conservative Republican president. The problem is that seems to be harder and harder to find every day. And what's more frustrating is the GOP leadership in both houses of Congress don't seem to be hearing what the conservatives have to say. They tend to dismiss and even castigate it sometimes. And I just would request that Senator Graham get a message to the leadership that if they don't learn to embrace the truly conservative folks in their party, they're going to cease to exist. I've been a Republican ever since I registered to vote. I no longer consider myself a Republican. I consider myself a conservative. And I would just like Senator Graham to pass that message along to the leadership that maybe it's time to rethink this thing.
Can I ask him a question?
Sure, certainly.
Sure.
Who would you like to see run in 2016?
I don't want to go on record there because I don't know who all is going to run.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what I'm saying, Senator Graham, is if you take a look at the 2012 election, that should have told us something, and apparently it did not.
Is it fair to say, Chris, that you would prefer to see someone of the Ted Cruz or Rand Paul ilk rather than, say, a Chris Christie?
Yeah, I personally, I think Chris Christie is left of a rhino. I think someone like Rand Paul would be maybe a great choice. But to be honest, I mean, I haven't studied it enough.
No, that's fair.
All I can say is that it's very frustrating to hear the Speaker of the House basically isolate and alienate truly conservatives.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim. I've received a lot of calls on this issue as well, Senator Graham. People have reacted with hurt and anger when you have Mitch McConnell, your compatriot in the Senate, talking about it's time for the GOP to stand up to the Tea Party. And when you have John Boehner say similar kinds of things, it appears that they are trying to distance themselves from what many of us consider the traditional base of the GOP?
Well, that's a good question. Now, the Tea Party, different components of it, and, it's not really hard to understand why the Tea Party came about. Frustration with the size and scope of government.
And the spending.
Yeah, between 2000 and basically 8 and 10.
Right.
Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, a $787 billion stimulus that doubled the size of the Department of Education that really didn't do much at all to create jobs. So it's very understandable why people would say this is not where the America needs to be going. And Obamacare is not about the 10% uninsured. It's about taking over health care and making it a European system where the employer will drop insurance because it's too expensive, put people into exchanges, basically run by the government.
Right.
I hope people listening here understand one thing. I'm with you on this. Obamacare is a backdoor way to bring about universal health care where the government runs the program and you get from the government what they decide to give to you.
Sure, Obama and Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi are all on record as saying they want single payer.
And look at the countries that have gone down that road. If you're willing to pay 70% of your income in taxes, you can get free health care and you can go to college. But there are no militaries in these countries.
Right.
The best way for America to prosper is to reform health care. I don't believe in monopolies. In South Carolina, there are just a handful of companies before Obamacare that would sell you insurance. Jim DeMint and I have been talking about this for years. You ought to knock down walls and let you buy insurance in California if it's best for your family.
Sure, if you can do that with car insurance, why can't you do it with health insurance?
Well, because health care, in the eyes of a liberal, is not something an individual should be able to decide.
True.
Health care is too important for you to decide. It is so important the government must decide for you. But every time the government makes these decisions, costs go up and quality goes down. So the idea of opening up private health care to more competition, Medicaid, what I would do is take every Medicaid patient and allow them to sign up for private health care with a government subsidy, but people would bid for their business. And I'd have, instead of running to the emergency room every time you got sick when you're on Medicaid, you'd have to have a co-payment. You'd do that less. If you smoke, you ought to pay more. There's so many different ways to reform health care. This is not about health care reform. This is about taking over 1/5 of the economy. Now, having said that, how did Obama beat us twice?
Good question.
He got more votes than we did. So that's how he beat us twice. Ronald Reagan was a conservative. At least I think he was. And his philosophy about conservatism was if I get 80% of what I want, then that's a good day and I'll get the 20% later. I think I'm physically and socially conservative with a record to prove it, but I don't mind trying to fix problems. What's broken about Washington is that we can't seem to get our act together as a nation to do the things that should have been done a long time ago, like entitlement reform and making the government more efficient and giving individuals more say about their lives. So we're in this great contest about what is conservatism. So when Tea Party people run against Mitch McConnell, don't expect for him to let you run against him and not push back. We're having a contest about what is conservative and how to grow the party. So if I get challenged by somebody who says they're a member of the Tea Party, they say I'm not conservative, I'm going to push back.
Mm-hmm.
To expect me not to really is just is saying there's no competition in politics. Put to our Tea Party friends, I guarantee you about 80% of the big issues we're together. How do you win in 2016? Do you think Hillary Clinton's the likely nominee?
Absolutely.
I do too. And let me tell you, that would be the third term of Barack Obama.
Yep.
She owns his foreign policy and the world is falling apart. It should be Hillary care, not Obamacare, because Bill and Hillary helped sell it. She owns his domestic and foreign policy agenda. What do you need in 2016? You need someone who can talk about being pro-life in a way not to alienate people. I'm proudly pro-life. I stand by the unborn from conception until death. I believe life is precious. It's a gift from God, and we should protect it. But I'm not going to talk about rape. I'm not pro-rape. I'm pro-life. So Hispanics are the fastest growing demographic in the country. We've gone from 44% to 27% among this demographic. They're pro-life, they're Catholic, they're hardworking, they're entrepreneurial. African Americans support traditional marriage higher than any group in America. So don't tell me the Republican Party has to be socially liberal to win the White House. We can be physically and socially conservative, but we got to put the country's interest ahead of any individual party. And I think the next nominee for the presidency on the Republican side needs to be able to connect with people in a wider area. We need to get more Hispanic votes, not less, and grow the vote among African Americans. I think we can get 15% of the African American vote. And if you got 40%, Bush got 44%, we win going away. And you don't have to be liberal. Entrepreneurship is something the Democratic Party can't even say, much less enact policies for. If you're an African American young man or young woman, Hispanic young man in particular, the last 6 years of Obama, 5+, have been a disaster for you. We will have a chance as a party to reconnect with America and have a chance to win in 2016. You know what I'm looking for? I'm looking for a conservative that can win. Because if we lose in 2016, we're not going to stop the Democratic president from nominating people to the Supreme Court when an opening comes. Our Constitution wasn't designed to allow the Senate to stop somebody in the opposite party from picking a judge. It was designed for advice and consent, not to basically undo elections. If we lose in 2016, God help this country. I think we can win. We got to start with 2014. If we don't win the Senate in 2014, I'll be greatly disappointed.
Yeah, me too.
Because every senator who voted for Obamacare is up for election. And I've got legislation that will allow individual states to opt out. So if California wants to stay in, go for it. But if South Carolina, Louisiana, and Arkansas would like to get out of Obamacare and do something different, I've got legislation that would allow for that. So to the gentleman out there, I want to win in 2014. I want to win in 2016. I want a conservative who can do what Ronald Reagan did, grow the vote.
Let's take a quick break here. It's 5:15, and we'll be right back with more of your calls on the way. Mr. Fogarty in the background, CCR, Green River, 4:51, 9 minutes before 5. I want to get as many of you on the phones who are patiently holding an opportunity to talk to Senator Graham, so I'll ask you to keep your questions brief if you can, so we can get as many callers in as possible, beginning with John, who is in Lyman. Hi, John. Welcome. You're on with Senator Lindsey Graham.
Hey, Bobby. Thanks for asking that question earlier in the show, and the senator danced around it, so let me ask it more directly. Senator, have you asked the principals, and by the principals I mean Panetta, Dempsey, or Ham, if they were given cross-border authority order the night of Benghazi, and if not, why not?
The answer, one, we have asked General Ham. I've talked to him twice. There was no stand-down order given to him.
That's not what I asked. I asked a cross-border authority order.
Yeah, to penetrate Libyan airspace. Mm-hmm. They told me no such request was made.
So you're saying they didn't give you that he didn't get cross-border authority order?
I'm saying that they never ordered any aircraft into Libyan airspace.
That's not. You're dancing around the question, Senator.
I'm not dancing around the question.
Did the president give the military cross-border authority to cross the borders into Libya?
Panetta said no. He had that authority on his own.
He said there was no stand-down order.
No,
nobody ever asked him.
I know what you're saying.
If he got cross-border authority order.
I'm telling you, he told me that he didn't need that authority from the president. He made a decision not to send anybody.
Senator, you know as well as I do that you need cross-border authority order from the president. There's a specific way to do it, and it's etched in stone. You know that.
Well, no, I don't know that. I'm telling you that the Secretary of Defense has all the authority he needs to send people into Libya from Italy or any other bordering country.
Obama said he gave cross-border authority order when they did Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
He made a point of saying that.
Here's what the president said. I told them to do whatever you need to do.
Exactly. But he didn't say he gave them cross-border authority order,
I'm agreeing with you.
Which ultimately meant they had to stand down.
I'm agreeing with you. The president did not tell the Secretary of Defense you have my permission to send military aircraft into Libyan airspace outside the country. But here's the question. What did the president do that night? They've made 2 movies about the Bin Laden raid. You've got all the photos of him in the Situation Room. Do you even know when the president went to bed? Do you know that he never talked to the Secretary of Defense for 3 days after the attack? He only talked for the Secretary of Defense for about 15 minutes at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Senator, we don't have a lot of time here. Without the cross-border authority order, no military could be sent into Libya. The fact that no military was sent into Libya actually means that they were not given cross-border authority order, which means that the whole thing is in Obama's lap.
The whole thing is in his Obama. You better believe that. Now, this is something we agree on. The commander-in-chief is responsible for the day before, that night, and after, before, during, and after. Where was our commander-in-chief?
Good question.
What hand-on guidance did he give? He directed the Bin Laden raid, if you watch the movie. Where was he at in Libya? But I've been a military lawyer for 31 years, and I'm not going to tell you something I don't agree with. The Secretary of Defense has the authority in a situation like this to send aircraft in. But here's the point. The commander-in-chief was disengaged. When did he go to bed? He went to a fundraiser the next day. What did he say when somebody told him?
If the Secretary of Defense had the authority, then why didn't he do it then, if that's what you say? I don't believe what you say, but if he had the authority, why didn't he do it?
Well, we've asked that.
You had an aircraft carrier group in the Mediterranean. You had Sicily, which was
Can I tell you what they say?
Tripoli was.
Right. Can I tell you what they say? You had Aviano Air Base.
In
you
Italy.
had people in the Mediterranean.
Right.
Here's what Panetta and Dempsey said. I asked them, you go on video. It's on our website. I'd be glad for you to look at it. Why was no military support sent in to help our folks in Benghazi? Why did not you send people, order aircraft in to buzz the place? And here's what they said. They thought that the situation was too uncertain to put people into the environment.
That's BS, Senator.
I'm with
BS.
you.
You know it, and I know it.
I'm with you. I'm with you. But I'm telling you what they told me. They told me they thought they didn't know enough to send aircraft in because it may do more harm than good. And secondly, they didn't think they could get there in time. But here's the magic question.
It was 9 hours.
Well, but here's the question. When it started, did you know when it was going to be over?
Sure. How do you know?
How in the world could the Secretary of Defense and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs?
Why hasn't Panetta been charged for this?
He's been before.
If what you say is true, and he had all the authority and he didn't do it, why isn't he locked up right now?
Because he made a discretionary decision not to send aid to our troops. And at the end of the day, I think that's what Benghazi's about. I think the average American is wanting to know.
The end of the day is Obama didn't want an armed military response going into Benghazi during the attack, and that's why he never gave the cross-border authority order. He purposely did not want military in there to disturb what he knew to be an attack there.
Well, here's what I believe. I believe that the commander-in-chief had absolutely no hands-on control that night. I believe that the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs understood Obama's foreign policy, that we're not going to be like Bush. We're not going to send in the Marines.
So why are you in front of the cameras telling the freaking people that this is all Obama's fault? Why aren't you in front of the cameras every single day?
Where have you been? Where do you live, and where have you been? What do you have a television? Do you have a television? Can you get something other than WORD?
John, excuse me. We don't want to turn it into a shouting contest.
No, John, you're not my enemy. I agree with you, but I have been on the floor of the United States Senate. I have been talking for a year and a half that the commander-in-chief is responsible for what happened that night, and how could he say for 2 weeks after the attack?
That it was
how
a
many
video.
letters have I written him and gotten one answer? I've destroyed a small forest. The one thing I can tell you that I am proud of, and I may not convince you, but the families of those fallen service members, those who served our country, think I have been very helpful in trying to find the truth. And quite frankly, when they say that, it makes me feel good because I am in the military. I'm still on that, in the reserves. It bothers me greatly that we've got a story about bin Laden they made 2 movies about, but you don't have any information about the commander-in-chief on September the 11th. You don't have any information about what he said and when he said it and when he went to bed. It is an absolute cluster, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
You probably can't say it, Senator, because as you mentioned, you are active duty military still.
Well, I'm a reservist, but not on reserve duty today.
Right. But there are, I think the vast majority of Americans believe that President Obama has lied about this from the beginning, that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has lied about this from the beginning, and that they didn't want another Black Hawk Down right before the election, and that's why they decided not to
Bob,
not to support the troops.
I think 7 weeks before the election, they created a story about a protest and a video that was politically helpful to them.
I believe so.
But
Senator,
not true, and if it would have been a Republican, it would be a different game.
Senator, thanks very much for your time. As always, I wish we'd had a chance to get to more callers.
I shall return.
Good. We look forward to it, and thank you again for your time for being here.
Thank you.
We'll be right back on the other side after the news with hour number 3 of the Bobby Mack Show. News is next. It's 5 o'clock.